Hey guys, Ben here and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about Superman Lois, a little bit to do with Tom Welling. This is again talking about Bitsy's recent comments. This is another piece of information that I wanted to break down and talk to you guys about. Also, we got some big news in regards to HBO Max coming to Europe finally, and we got news about My Adventures with Superman and its potential continuation beyond season 2. So if you do go on to enjoy the video, please be sure to leave a like and a comment and subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future videos later this year. Okay, so first things first, in this video we're going to talk about HBO Max coming to Europe, and then we'll move on to Superman Lois afterwards. So it's just been announced recently that HBO Max would be coming to Europe, and that doesn't mean the UK, that means the rest of Europe, right? So Annecy, the film festival, is an animation film festival that takes place in Annecy, France. It was a big deal, and it's always a big deal, and James Gunn was recently there, and he gave some comments about Creature Commandos. I made a video on that, you can go check that video out, it's up on the channel right now. And so it was really good timing that Max has just apparently launched in Europe this week. I can't confirm it because I'm not, in mainland Europe right now, but I will be in the next coming days, so I'll see if it's available just to 100% confirm. But according to the Hollywood Reporter, this is what they say: streaming platform Max launched this week in Europe, allowing many Annecy attendees a greater chance to experience Adult Swim programming. The animation festival continues this Saturday in Annecy, France, so that was a couple of days ago. And so, talking about Adult Swim, the reason that they're talking about it, because it's relevant to do with obviously animation, and My Adventures with Superman also in this article is confirmed to come back for a third season at Adult Swim. So that's the inclusion of that, that's the reason for that. And so currently it's airing its second season, and it will continue with the third season with obviously Jack Quaid playing Superman and Clark Kent, Alice Lee portraying Lois Lane, and in the most recent episode of My Adventures with Superman, Supergirl made her debut. So that's a big deal, and it's going to continue into season 3 on Adult Swim, on Max, and you guys who live in mainland Europe are going to be able to get Max starting this week. I think this is relevant news because they are expanding, and I know a lot of my audience, a lot of you guys who are watching the video are probably from America and you already have Max, so you kind of don't really see the precedent in this, but it's huge. Like the UK, where I live, specifically in England, we don't have access to Max, and I think by introducing it in Europe first, and you have to realize in Europe they actually have HBO, they have HBO Go, but I think they're transitioning it to introduce Max over there, so that's good. But we have nothing here in England. Like, what we have is whenever a Warner Brothers project like Superman Lois comes, it will go to like a random network, or normally it goes to Sky, which not everyone has. It's very hard to get a hold of because it's very expensive, and so it's always super hard to get up-to-date episodes straight away. And I think, by them introducing that, that's a really good sign for the rest of Europe. So that's the news in regards to that. Let's move on to talk about Superman and Lois, because we are still talking about the Superman homepage video that we've made multiple videos on. So go check out the video of Bitsy Tulloch at the convention in Illinois, and this convention is the 2024 Superman celebration. So yeah, it's a pretty big convention out there in America. But we got some more comments from Bitsy that I wanted to break down in this video, and so now this is our Superman Lois section. So she got asked, and again I'm paraphrasing, I've got my notes and that's what I'm using, because the video doesn't always necessarily give us like straight up quotes because it was just kind of broken into bits. But anyway, at one point during the panel with Bitsy at Superman Celebration, Bitsy was asked about what it was like working with Tom Welling in Crisis. Now, she said straight up she didn't spend that much time with him. Obviously, Tom was just in that one scene in the Batwoman episode, and he was mainly shooting with, obviously, Erica Durance was there, and then you had John Crye's Lex Luthor from Supergirl, so he mainly worked with them. But he did briefly work with Lois, and they were on the same set at the same time. And Bitsy described Tom Welling as enormous. Talking about his stature and his build, obviously over the years he's definitely bulked up a lot compared to when he was young and when he was on Smallville. And so she said, I worked with him briefly, he's a really nice guy, but I didn't have a ton of stuff with him. And the reason I bring this up is obviously we've been talking about Smallville recently, the failed spin-offs that they were trying to do, and the fact that they're trying to do that anime animated show. So I think Tom Welling is very relevant right now, and I think that's why a lot of people have been asking questions at these panels and conventions to, you know, our main Superman Lois actors, talking about what it was like working with someone like Tom Welling in Crisis. And so yeah, despite her barely working with him, she described him as a really nice guy. And then she was actually asked about what it was like working with Brandon Routh, as Brandon Routh was in an episode with her as well in Crisis. And there was a scene where Brandon Routh and Tyler went at it together, so against each other. Obviously we have Brandon Routh, who played a version of Superman, the Kingdom Come Arrowverse Superman, and everyone is a huge fan of him. They love the costume, and at first Bitsy didn't remember shooting a scene specifically with him, but then she was reminded what specific scene it was, and then she said it was a crazy scene. He was really sweet, and obviously they didn't work too much together, despite Brandon Routh being a big part of the Arrowverse. Obviously he played the Atom on Legends, and he appeared in various other shows as well, and lots of crossovers. So yeah, they worked together just briefly, but mainly the question was orientated around Brandon versus Tyler, and she described it as a crazy scene. There's not too much for me to actually break down here about like analyzing her specific comments. And so then she moved on to something really interesting. She started talking about the crossovers and the fact that Superman Lois has had a distinct lack of crossovers. So obviously we know the reasons behind it, that the showrunner didn't want to have Superman Lois super involved with the Arrowverse, because they thought, okay, Superman Lois is a great show, we've had a great first season, let's stay separate for now. And obviously at that time, Todd Helbing didn't realize that the Arrowverse was going. I think he's more open to crossing over now that the Arrowverse is over. And that's because we've heard of Tom Cavanaugh supposedly showing up in the season finale of season 4. But what Bitsy had to say was that the crossovers were really fun to shoot, as you were just there with all the leads from all the shows, and there was people like Grant, Melissa, Ruby, specifically talking about Crisis. Obviously she was in Elseworlds as well, so she did have 2 experiences crossing over before moving on to Superman Lois, because you have to remember Superman Lois came out after Crisis on Infinite Earths, so Crisis actually predates it, and she did appear in the Arrowverse as a different version of Lois along with Tyler as well. And so she also described it as a bit of chaos, because every lead had to have one line during big scenes in those big battles, which is very true. If you go back and watch the crossovers, like they always have to share the lines out, and you can imagine just being on set and it being like, okay, you go Grant now, this is your line, say one line, Melissa you continue his line, then Ruby you go to the next, and then Tyler you go to the next, and then yeah, I can imagine it's just like chaos shooting that. But it was apparently really fun to shoot, because, you know, it was a crossover between all these shows. Obviously back when Crisis was on, there was still 5+ shows going on, and everyone obviously knew what a big deal these crossover events were, and it was such a big thing in the fandom. Like everyone was just buzzing all the time, and it was amazing. So she also went on to talk about Superman Lois briefly having other plans to do more crossovers beyond Crisis on Infinite Earths, but with COVID happening and things being locked down, and you know, the fact that they had to be in bubbles, she talks about working specifically with Tyler, and then if they had to shoot with someone else, they would hang out with someone else during a certain week. And so things were really tough when Superman Lois started, and as we all know, that contributed to them not doing crossovers in the first season. That's why Superman Lois remained separate despite still being technically part of the Arrowverse throughout season 1. But as we talked about earlier, I believe he made the decision, and talking about Todd Helbing, the showrunner here, that during season 2 they wanted to double down on being separate, to be something different than all the other shows, because all the other shows were openly crossing over and they all had an impact on the different shows, and Superman Lois just wanted to be its own thing. And so for a time there was a plan to cross Superman Lois over with Batwoman. I remember actually talking about that when that was first rumored. I thought that was always a weird crossover, Batwoman and Superman Lois. I get the link between Superman and Batman, but I never thought that Batwoman would specifically go to Superman Lois straight away. I would always think they would have gone to Supergirl first, but maybe that was due to Supergirl ending, that there wasn't those conversations to do like a Supergirl Batwoman crossover. And for Superman Lois, I would always assume they would want to do a Flash crossover. That would be my go-to. Or obviously with John Diggle being so prominent in season 1, maybe an Arrow crossover, but Arrow had already ended by the time that Superman Lois started, so obviously you couldn't do like a 2-show crossover. You would just have to bring characters in, like they brought John Diggle in. And so yeah, I think it made the most sense for Superman Lois to cross over with the Flash, but obviously that never ended up happening. And there is the chance, as we said in the season 4 finale, that Tom Cavanagh, who obviously was on the Flash as Reverse Flash, Eobard Thawne, and also as many versions of Harrison Wells, he is supposedly going to be showing up in this season 4 finale. So that will be our first Flash crossover as far as I'm aware. So that pretty much does it for this video, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Obviously there wasn't too much to break down in regards to her comments in regards to Tom Welling and Brandon Routh, but I think there was an interesting conversation to be had about the crossovers and the fact that obviously at the time it was tough to cross over, but they really wanted to do it. And then I think the showrunner just made the decision to keep them separate just after all the struggles of trying to get crossovers going back during the crazy times that Superman Lois started. Let me know if you guys are from Germany, France, anywhere else in mainland Europe. Are you excited to get Max in your country? That must be very cool. I can't relate. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to leave a like and a comment. It would really help this video get out there. Also subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future videos. And for now, I'll catch you guys later. Goodbye.